Hey guys, what is up, and I welcome each and every one of you to a new League of Legends video. So today we'll be taking an early look into patch 9.2, which is going to be the first patch of season 9 because season 9 itself actually starts the second this patch hits the live servers. So if you guys end up enjoying this kind of early look into the patch, then let me know by hitting that like button. But this video is going to be made in collaboration with ProGuides as per usual. It's a website that helps you improve your overall League of Legends gameplay and knowledge. The link for them is down below, and especially with season 9 coming up, this could be the perfect time to check them out. So the first and probably the biggest change coming out next patch, and of course to start season 9 ranked, is going to be the position ranks are finally here. If you're not up to date as to what exactly this means, well, position ranks essentially means now that you will have an ELO or MMR or rank based on every single position you play. So for instance, your mid lane, if that's your primary role and that's the one you queue as your primary role and everything you main it, that's going to be your best role by far, right? So let's say you're maybe Platinum 1 in that role at the moment. Well, your secondary role, let's say it's AD carry. Maybe you're Platinum 4 in that role. So whenever you get put into these roles within your game, you'll actually be placed according to that specific MMR and your skill level of that specific role. And if you're autofilled, maybe jungle, and you have no idea how to do it, and you just maybe are at best a gold 5 player, then apparently in theory, you'll be placed as a gold 5 jungler in your game. Now, I will admit this part seems a little bit weird because at the end of the day, even if, for instance, like myself, if I'm being placed as, let's say, a low platinum jungler, at the end of the day, my personal skill level as a player is obviously higher than that, so I can still transition that into that elo and still do better, I would assume, than usual. So I'm not really sure how Riot is going to take that into consideration and how that's going to work properly. But don't forget, this also does mean that you won't have just one single rank that just gives you your overall rank as a player, because it is now split up into every single role, and every single role will have its own respective rank. But this is going to be easily the biggest change coming to the new ranked season, so make sure you read up on it and understand what it is, because this just changes the way ranked is played overall and the way you queue for it. Now, the second biggest change coming this patch is of course going to be the release of Sylas, the newest champion in League of Legends. Now, I have released a bunch of gameplays of this champion already that I recommend checking out if you have not yet, but the champion is essentially a melee kind of assassin bruiser hybrid, AP focused, that can steal literally anybody's ultimate and use it for himself, which is insanely not only overpowered, but pretty fun. His passive is like a Sheen AoE type effect. You have his Q that's essentially kind of like two chains that he throws down, similar to Hammer's missiles with how it works, because you can change the angle that it's essentially thrown at. Your W is kind of a point and click, similar to a Laoe ability that just gives you a bunch of lifesteal and does extra damage based on the amount of HP the champion is missing. If they're below 40%, or if you're below 40%, either of them is amplified. Your E is a double dash, something similar to Echo's E, except for him, the second part of his E for Sylas, you have to actually land a skill shot to pull yourself towards the target, but it does CC, so it kind of makes up for it. And like I said, his ultimate, you literally steal someone else's ultimate. The range on this is actually quite forgiving, so you can literally just run around, steal someone's ultimate, and just chill with it. Just wait for the right moment to strike. You don't always have to use your ultimate right then and there. Upon release, the champion seems pretty damn busted, I'm not gonna lie. I think they will fine-tune his numbers a bit before it gets onto the live service, because the healing, for instance, from his W was just way too overbuffed. All in all, he definitely has like a very kind of simple introductory kit, but at the same time, he is also a champion that once you actually look into him and put a lot of time into him, you can really tell the difference between a good Sylas and a great Sylas. I, for one, am looking forward to actually maining him, and I don't mean this as a meme and I have a new main every single video. I actually really want to put him in my champ pool. But aside from that, Sylas already has some potential nerfs coming in as well. So with his W, the heal AP ratio is being lowered by 5%, and the flat base amount of healing as well is being lowered. However, with that being said, his ultimate is actually getting a slight buff, so the AD to AP has been increased from 0.4 to 0.7. In other words, what this means is the fact that whenever you steal an ultimate from a champion that has AD scaling, Sylas automatically converts it to AP scaling, and now this will actually convert it even better, or I guess more favorable for Sylas. Following this, we have some changes coming over to Aurelion Sol. Now, this change was supposed to hit the live servers, the patch that just hit about a week ago, but it actually got scrapped, and instead it's going on the next patch instead, where essentially now Aurelion Sol can recast his Q ability with stuns a lot closer to him before it is forced to move away farther. But in turn, this also has a new effect to kind of make that not super broken sounding, because at the moment it does sound pretty broken, to where now the minimum and maximum stun duration is just based on how far the disc size is, or in other words, how far the star itself or the Q ability has actually moved away from Aurelion Sol. The farther it is, the more it'll stun for. But regardless, this is a fantastic buff for Aurelion Sol, because he's always been very weak when facing melee assassin or bruiser type champions, since he can never use his Q on them unless he combines it with his ultimate, but now that shouldn't be as much of a problem. following this, we have some nerfs coming over to Brand, and thank goodness for that. It's going to be towards his passive, Blaze, where the dot damage has been lowered and the detonation damage has actually been increased. So in other words, walking around just harassing with your E ability and having the passive tick away with the Liandry's especially is not going to be as powerful anymore. However, if you actually land your full combo on the champion and you proc the passive or the second passive that has the big detonation ring, that's going to do a bit more damage to kind of reward you for actually landing your abilities. Next up, we have some nerfs coming over to Galio, and thank goodness for this as well, because Galio right now is one of the best mid laners at the moment because not only how tanky he is, but just how much damage his Q does. So to my surprise, Riot is actually nerfing the correct part of Galio, which is his Q. The gust damage has been lowered, the mana cost has been increased, but the tornado AP ratio has actually been increased by about a double of how much it scales per 100 AP, which I guess isn't a horrible thing because at least it'll be good late game, but considering they only reduced the damage on his Q's base damage by 20, and that's only at rank 5, that's kind of lackluster. So I'm hoping the mana cost is what prevents him from just spamming it too often in the laning phase, which is where it's insanely powerful. Moving on to the next champion, I want to be talking about some Irelia changes that just hit the PBE server as well. Now these ones are going to be quite interesting. So starting with her passive, no longer does it deal bonus damage to shields at max stacks. Her Q ability's minion damage has been changed from dealing double damage to minions to now having an actual base amount of damage it deals to minions on top of the actual base damage it deals in general. But moving on to her ultimate, the ultimate's damage has been increased by 100 by rank 3. The slow potency has been increased to 90%, even though the wall duration has been lowered to only 2.5 seconds at all ranks rather than starting at 2.5 and going up to 3.5. And the most interesting part is the fact that the ultimate no longer disarms enemies when passing through, which I think was one of the biggest things that made this ultimate very powerful. Is it worth the trade-off? Honestly, I actually might go ahead and say yes. I mean, the disarm was fantastic, but the extra 100 damage and 90% slow on the ultimate is going to make landing Irelia E abilities so much easier than before. Just follow up with your first E, ultimate someone, Q on top of them, throw the second E, and you're pretty much guaranteed to land it unless they flash or use some kind of like Lucian E or Ezreal E ability. Next up, we have a quick buff coming over to Jarvan, and it's going to be towards his E ability Demacian Standard, where the passive and the flag aura attack speed have just flat out been increased by 5% at every single rank. Now, believe it or not, this is actually quite good. I mean, 5%, especially once you get into the late game, is a lot of attack speed. So if your AD carry is popping off and you throw down the flag, that extra 5% will multiply their damage a lot. So it won't really do a whole lot for Jarvan in probably the earlier parts of the game, other than very slightly helping his jungle clear or something like that. But as it scales, it'll be a lot more impactful. Now next, we have some pretty big changes coming over to Kayn. A lot of this is going to be kind of just changes that help you understand the champion better and what transformation you're going to get. So speaking of which, his passive is going to be a lot more obvious as to which form you're going to be getting or you're closer to or whatever. It'll have kind of a different color around the bar as you fill it up based on which form you're closer, so it'll be a lot more blue looking if you're closer to the blue form and vice versa for the red form. You can stack up the form that you want to get from every single champion that you fight, so even though you want to get maybe the blue form, you can still stack it up from the red form. It'll just obviously have to be more blue than red. The total transformation points required to change have been increased from 400 to 500. All in all, this will just make things a lot more understandable for yourself and your allies, since you can also ping to them which form you're closer to and how close you are. You can now actually use the recall animation and actually start recalling before Shadow Step has elapsed. Before you couldn't, which would always kind of make Kayn stand there for a brief second or something like that and just wait for the form to go off, which is always a bad thing. Next, for his ultimate, you can actually reappear closer to your target. At the moment, it's pretty much a set fixed distance that you come out of your target and how far you come out. Now you can either go the same distance, or if you put your mouse cursor closer to your target as you're coming out, you'll appear almost right beside them, so you can just continue auto attacking them instead of having to use your Q ability or something in order to gap close once again, since you went way too far. But if you're blue Kayn, you can actually not only still do this exact same thing, but your additional range to come out of your ultimate, so you can actually go farther away from the target, is 200 extra range than the red Kayn form. Moving along, we have some changes coming over to Neeko, starting off with her W, where the clone duration has been increased by 1 second and the movement speed duration has also been increased by 1 second, so now both at 3. And even though that's actually a decent buff when it comes to juking, when it comes to just moving faster, her ultimate no longer slows enemies around Neeko as she leaps up into the air. But to kind of compensate for that, since it no longer slows, it'll actually have a slightly lower or shorter leap duration, now being 0.6 rather than 0.75. The next champion that's receiving some changes is going to be Volibear, and towards his E ability, to where now it no longer has a flat base damage. Instead, it only has an 8% target max HP damage threshold. So I mean, it could be pretty damn good when it comes to late game, but in the laning phase or even early parts of the game, if you're jungling, it's not going to be anywhere near as powerful. And then you have a quick buff on his ultimate where the AP ratio has been increased by 10% and the delay before the initial bolt on cast has also been changed to be a tad faster. Following this, some changes coming over to Yorick as well, a champion I'm sure we've all forgotten about. Starting with his passive, ghouls no longer deal reduced damage when they are far away from Yorick, and the deaths required for a grave have also been lowered across the board. So in other words, some pretty decent buffs coming over to his passive, however his ultimate received some slight nerfs. Because the maiden now has less base health, however she does scale more than double off of Yorick's health instead. So late game it'll be a lot more impactful, but earlier game it'll be a little bit less impactful. But she now has a new effect where Yorick can press the ultimate again and actually send her down the nearest lane, which is quite good. Because how many times has the maiden glitched out and just not really done what you want her to do? Next up, very quickly, we have our favorite mage in the mid lane, Zoe. Her paddle star, her Q ability, the max damage AP ratio has been lowered by 25%, and I thought I'd just throw that in there very quickly because I think people will appreciate it. Now moving on to some changes coming over to items in other parts of the game, we have Morellonomicon and Oblivion Orb both being nerfed by 5 AP. I mean, not the end of the world, but at the end of the day, this item is very, very useful and powerful, so a nerf is not surprising. But then we have a really cool change coming over to Relic Shield to where now an attack or spell can proc the Relic Shield passive to execute a minion and to heal yourself and the nearest allied champion. So this is a great thing for ranged champions down the bot lane that want to go for Targons. And last but not least, we have some nerfs coming over to the jungle, starting off with Challenging Smite, which is the Red Smite. The damage per tick and the damage total have both been lowered, the dot duration has been lowered by a second, and no longer will it grant vision for the marked duration. And it doesn't stop there because Blue Smite as well has been nerfed, where the damage has just flat out across the board been lowered as well. As a laner, I have to say I'm very happy to see Challenging Smite get nerfed. I personally think the item is just insanely powerful, at least the smite itself is insanely powerful. But for junglers, I'm sure this is going to be a little bit annoying to see. But either way guys, that is it for this video. There you have it, a bunch of changes already on the PBE server for the next patch, patch 9.2, which is the official start of season 9. Keep in mind, this is not all of the changes. I'll be going over every single change and the final ones that actually will hit the live service guaranteed at the end of the week, right before the actual patch hits the live service as per usual. But this is just to give us a better idea and an early look. So if you guys end up enjoying this video, then don't forget to hit that like button. Thank you all so much for watching. Subscribe if you haven't, all that good stuff, and I'll see you for the next one. Peace.